I used to think fear belonged only to the living. In this line of work, you grow a thick skin fast. 12 years at Rosebridge Crematory will do that to a man. I've handled bodies in every condition imaginable. I've worked double shifts, midnight shifts, shifts where the world outside felt like it had forgotten we existed. None of it ever bothered me. Until the night I saw a dead man standing inside the cremation chamber, before we ever closed the door. It was just past 1:20 a.m. The building was quiet enough that I could hear every hum of the ventilation ducts, every pop of metal cooling from the day's last burn. My coworker, Caleb, had stepped out to grab the paperwork we needed. I stayed back to run the usual checks. Temperature, door hinges, ignition lock, all routine, all muscle memory. I hit the light switch above the chamber. And I froze. There, inside the steel chamber, a full-grown man was standing upright. Not lying on the gurney. Not slumped. Standing. His shoulders hunched just slightly forward, his chin tilted down, his eyes fixed right on me. For 3 long seconds I couldn't move. My brain tried to file what I was seeing under something logical. A prank, a reflection, a shadow. But nothing fit. The chamber was 10 feet deep, bare metal from end to end. There was nowhere for anyone to hide, nowhere for a person to slip in without the heavy door screaming against its hinges. And worst of all, there was no body scheduled inside yet. I finally managed to inhale, stumbled back, and shouted for Caleb. He came running, half irritated, half confused, but when we flicked the lights on again, the chamber was completely empty. No man. No movement. No sound. Just a faint, damp outline of 2 bare footprints on the metal floor, like someone had walked through ashes still wet from a storm. Caleb insisted I was exhausted. Maybe I was. But I know what I saw. I know what stood there staring at me with eyes that did not blink. And I know this much. Whatever was inside that chamber did not enter it like a living man, and it didn't leave like one either. People assume a crematory is loud, roaring fire, clanging metal, the kind of place where noise fills the silence so you don't have to think too hard about what's happening inside those walls. But Rosebridge Crematory wasn't loud. It was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the building itself was holding its breath. Rosebridge sat at the edge of town, tucked between an abandoned textile mill and a cemetery older than most of the roads around it. If you drove past, you'd barely notice it. No big sign, no flowers, no comforting slogans. Just gray brick, one flickering security light, and a driveway worn smooth by 30 years of hearses. Inside, the silence changed. It wasn't peaceful. It was dense, a pressure you felt in your jaw first, then behind the eyes. The kind of quiet that made you whisper without realizing why. The air carried a coldness that never quite lifted, even when the furnaces were running hot enough to warp steel. Metal tables. Concrete floors. Stacks of paperwork yellowed at the edges. Everything smelled like disinfectant and something faintly sweet that clung to your clothes long after you'd gone home. You don't forget that smell. You just learn to stop noticing it. Most nights it was just me and the machines. But that night I wasn't alone. Caleb Morris was covering the shift with me, a younger guy, soft-spoken, still hopeful enough to believe this job was temporary. He'd only been with us 3 years. He wasn't hardened by routine the way I was. He still apologized to the bodies under his breath as if they could hear him. He didn't grow up around death the way I did. I'd seen it early, relatives, accidents, the quiet kinds of losses people don't talk about. Death didn't scare me. The process didn't scare me. It was predictable, methodical, almost mathematical. You check the tags. You confirm the paperwork. You prep the chamber. You do the job. But Rosebridge had its own personality, and the longer you worked there, the more you felt it. Some nights, the ductwork sighed like someone exhaling. The motion sensor in hallway B would flick on even when no one walked past. The old intake door at the back would rattle in perfect rhythm, as if someone were knocking from the outside, always 3 taps, never more. We joked about it for years. Rosebridge ghosts, Caleb would say. But every joke had an edge. Because none of us could explain why the temperature in the prep room sometimes dropped 15 degrees without warning, or why paperwork went missing, only to reappear in places no one used. Then there was the story about the former manager, Raymond Coyle. Caleb mentioned him once during a lunch break, An offhand comment about how Raymond used to hear things in the walls before he vanished for 3 days. When authorities finally found him, he died standing upright, eyes open, as if he'd been waiting for something. The company didn't talk about him anymore. His office was emptied out. His name scraped off the plaque. His personnel file sealed tighter than classified government documents. But people whispered. They always whispered. That night, the night I saw a man standing inside the chamber, the building's mood felt wrong from the moment we clocked in. The air was heavier. The lights dimmer. Even the hum of the ventilation shafts felt strained, like the ducts were full of gravel. Around midnight, fog rolled in from the cemetery, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The entire place smelled of cold stone and wet earth. The front door kept clicking as if someone were testing the latch. I should have trusted my instincts then. I should have recognized the feeling that something was off, not ghost story off, but the kind of off that makes your spine knot itself up and your stomach tighten. But routine is a powerful drug. I told myself it was the weather, the night shift, fatigue, and then the body arrived, late, unannounced, tagged with the name I would soon wish I'd never read at all. Raymond Coyle. The call came in at 12:47 a.m. Late night deliveries weren't unheard of, but they were rare, usually reserved for car accidents or unattended deaths where the coroner needed the body moved quickly. Caleb and I shared a look when the intercom buzzed. Neither of us said anything, but we both felt the same pinch of unease. I stepped outside to open the service gate. The air was colder than it should have been for a spring night, the fog so heavy it felt like walking through wet cotton. A single van idled in the driveway, its headlights cutting 2 sharp beams through the mist. The driver, a woman from the county's transport unit, hopped out. I recognized her, Dana Hemsley. She'd been doing transfers as long as I had. Stayed calm through everything. But tonight, her hands were shaking when she passed me the clipboard. "You all right?" I asked. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "I'm not sure what happened with this one," she whispered. "But I'd get this done quick." That wasn't a tone I'd ever heard from Dana. I glanced down at the paperwork. Name Raymond Coyle. Age 62. Condition non-traumatic. Status rigor complete. My stomach cramped. It took me a second to process the name, but when it landed hard. Raymond. Former manager of Rosebridge. The man who vanished for 3 days. The man they found dead standing upright. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You sure this is right?" Dana nodded, but her eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Right tag. Right address. But Ethan," she swallowed. "When we found him, he wasn't lying down." A cold ripple slid through my spine. We moved to the back of the van. She unlocked the doors, and together we eased the gurney down the ramp. Even with the body bag zipped up, something felt off, like the weight was distributed wrong. Bodies normally settle. They slump, they lean, gravity finds a way to claim them. But this one felt balanced, centered. We wheeled him inside. The prep room lights flickered once, as if the building itself recognized him. Caleb stepped forward to help, but when he saw the name on the tag, he froze. "Wait," he whispered. "That's him?" "Yeah." Neither of us said the rest aloud. The man who died in this very building. We unzipped the bag. Even after all my years in this job, I wasn't ready for what I saw. Raymond's face was gray, waxy, but untouched. No bruising, no trauma, no sign of collapse. His eyes were half open, the irises clouded but somehow still tracking toward the ceiling like he'd been mid-sentence when time stopped. His jaw hung with the faintest parting, like he'd tried to speak. And his posture. Even on the gurney, he looked like a man who'd been forced from a standing position. His shoulders stiff, his spine unnaturally straight, knees barely bent. Like rigor had set in while he was still upright. Caleb took a step back. "Jesus, why does he look like that?" "He was found standing," I murmured. The room felt instantly smaller. We washed the body, checked the ID tag, recorded the arrival time. Every motion felt mechanical, as if part of me had detached from the moment just to get through it. But the longer I worked, the harder it became to ignore the sense that something was watching us. Not from the hall, not from the cameras, but from right there on the table. At one point as I adjusted his arm, I swear the muscles in his jaw twitched. A tiny movement, barely perceptible. I told myself it was residual nerve activity. It happens sometimes. But the fear hit so hard and fast it tasted like metal on my tongue. When we finished, we wheeled the gurney toward the furnace room. Caleb went to grab the intake file from the office, which left me alone with Raymond Coyle's body. The same man I would soon see standing inside the chamber, staring at me from a place he never should have been. The hallway to the furnace room was long and narrow, lit by fluorescent tubes that buzzed just loud enough to get under your skin. I'd walked this hallway thousands of times, but that night each step felt heavier, like the floor itself was resisting me. Raymond's gurney rolled with a strange steadiness, the wheels gliding smoother than they should have, almost as if the weight was shifting on its own. I parked the gurney beside the chamber and reached up to switch on the inspection light. The bulb flickered twice before settling into a steady glow, casting the inside of the furnace in a dull, sterile white. Normally this was the simplest part of the job. Check for debris, check the rails, check the ignition sensors. A routine so familiar I could do it in my sleep. But tonight something in the air felt wrong. The charge. As if the room itself was preparing for something I hadn't agreed to be part of. I stepped closer, the soles of my boots echoing off the tile floor. I leaned forward, one hand braced on the heavy steel door. And then, my breath hitched. A man was standing inside the chamber. Not lying on the slab. Not slumped in the back. Standing. Upright. Perfectly still. Facing me. For a moment I couldn't even process it. My mind tried to break the image apart into something logical. Reflections, shadows, maybe a leftover shape burned into my eyes from the dim hallway. But no amount of rationalizing could erase what was in front of me. He was tall. Thin. Shoulders rigid, chin lowered just enough that his eyes, dark, hollow, impossibly focused, met mine through strands of hair singed at the edges. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Because the man in that chamber, he looked exactly like Raymond Coyle. Except that Raymond Coyle was lying on the gurney right beside me. The temperature in the room dropped so fast the hairs on my arms stood up. My fingers went numb against the steel door. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. The figure didn't sway. He didn't tremble. He didn't show the slightest sign of being affected by gravity, fear, or even existence. He just stood there, shoulders stiff, eyes fixed on me with a stillness that wasn't human. For a second, just one horrifying second, I could swear those eyes held recognition. Like he remembered me. Like he'd been waiting for me. A metallic taste flooded my mouth. I forced myself to swallow. "Caleb," I shouted, voice cracking. Silence. The figure didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. His chest didn't rise. His jaw didn't move. Nothing. He was as motionless as a statue carved from ash and bone. I stumbled back 2 steps, gripping the door frame so hard the metal edge cut into my palm. My heart hammered against my ribs. The chamber light buzzed, brightened, then dimmed again. "Caleb," I yelled louder this time, throat scraping. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Caleb burst into the room, wide-eyed and out of breath. "What happened? You okay?" I pointed toward the chamber, my hand shaking uncontrollably. "There's someone inside. Look." He rushed to the doorway and flicked the overhead light back on. The chamber was empty. Completely empty. No figure. No shadow. No trace of anyone ever standing there. Except for one thing. On the smooth metal floor of the chamber, right where the figure had been standing, were 2 faint, dark, damp footprints. Bare footprints. Human-sized. As if someone had stood there moments earlier, their feet sinking slightly into wet ash. Caleb stared at them, his jaw tightening. "What the hell?" "Ethan, who did you see?" I couldn't answer him. Not with words. My eyes drifted to the gurney beside us. Raymond's gurney. The bag still partially unzipped. His stiff gray hands still folded unnaturally over his abdomen. Caleb followed my gaze and his skin went pale. "No," he whispered. "No way. Ethan, he's been dead for 2 days." But I wasn't looking at the body anymore. I was staring at the chamber door's tiny observation window, at the faint reflection of a face behind my shoulder. A face with hollow eyes. A face I recognized. A face that was smiling. I spun around, but the room was empty. Yet something lingered, an invisible weight pressing against my temples, a whisper of cold breath trailing the back of my neck, a certainty that whatever I saw hadn't vanished. It had simply moved. Somewhere behind us, inside the walls, waiting for the next time I'd look. Caleb didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. He just stood there, staring at the damp footprints inside the chamber as if his brain couldn't decide whether to accept or reject what his eyes were telling him. I didn't blame him. I was still trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. But then the building chimed, 3 sharp beeps from the security system, like the tone it made when someone opened the back door. We both flinched. The hell was that? Caleb whispered. I swallowed hard. Back in trance. But no one should be coming in at this hour. We stepped into the hallway together, side by side. The air felt heavier than before, thick enough that each breath tasted metallic. The lights overhead flickered in a slow, unsettling rhythm. Buzz, pop, buzz, pop, like the electrical system was pulsing with a heartbeat not its own. We walked toward the back of the building, boots clicking on tile. Halfway down the hall, the temperature plummeted. It was so sudden that my breath fogged in front of me. Caleb rubbed his arms. It feels like a freezer in here. We turned the corner, and the motion sensor light at the end of the hallway snapped on. But no one was there. Just an empty corridor stretching toward the loading dock like an open throat. Then the light snapped off, and immediately turned back on. Like someone was pacing beneath it. Caleb's voice trembled. Maybe it's the wiring. Yeah, I muttered. Maybe. But I didn't believe that. Not for a second. We kept moving, each step slower than the last. The air pressure shifted, the way it does when someone opens a door behind you. A cold, deliberate draft slid down my spine. I turned. No one. But there was a faint sound, almost too low to register, coming from the direction of the furnace room. A tapping. Light. Rhythmic. Like fingernails gently tapping on metal. Caleb heard it too. Tell me that's you playing a joke. I'm not touching anything. The tapping grew louder. Sure. Insistent. Tap tap tap. Tap tap tap. Tap tap tap. A pattern. A message. A summons. We hurried back toward the furnace room. The door was ajar now. Neither of us had left it that way. Inside, the overhead lamp swung gently, casting shadows that stretched and recoiled across the walls like they were alive. The tapping stopped the moment we entered. And then another sound replaced it. A dragging noise. From beneath the gurney holding Raymond's body. A slow, gritty slide, as if something or someone was shifting its weight under the metal frame. Ethan? Caleb whispered. I forced myself to step closer. My shoes scraped the floor. The dragging stopped. I crouched, gripping the base of the gurney, preparing myself to see a rat or a loose strap or anything normal. There was nothing under there. But there was something on the tile floor. A streak of black ash. Curved. Like a finger had been dragged across it. An icy wind blew across my cheek, indoors where no wind existed. Caleb backed into the wall. We need to call someone. A supervisor. The police. I don't know. Someone. I should have agreed. I should have walked out the front door and not looked back. But something in me felt glued to the room, not out of curiosity but out of dread, a cold instinct that told me whatever was happening wasn't happening to the building. It was happening to us. The wall-mounted security monitor flickered on behind us. Static at first. Then the camera feed stabilized, 8 screens showing 8 angles of the crematory. In 5 of them, nothing unusual appeared. In the 6th, the motion sensor in hallway B blinked red. In the 7th, the prep room door slowly eased open on its own. And in the 8th, my blood turned to ice. On the camera showing the furnace room, our room, there was a dark silhouette standing behind us. Tall, gaunt, hat slightly tilted. But in the physical room no one was there. Caleb let out a strangled noise. Ethan, what the silhouette moved. On the screen only. Not in the room. It leaned forward, stretching into the camera's frame as if putting its face right against the lens. A distorted shape. An unnatural angle. a mouth pulled too wide. I grabbed Caleb by the arm. We're leaving. Now. We bolted out of the furnace room. The lights in the hallway blazed bright white, then cut out entirely. We were plunged into darkness. The dragging sound returned, this time right behind us. Faster. Hungry. We ran. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing the hall in dim red glow, long shadows stretching across the floor. Then from deep within the crematory, a voice, low, breathy, broken, whispered my name. Ethan. I froze mid-stride. Caleb nearly collided with me. Don't stop, he shouted. But my legs wouldn't move. Because the whisper wasn't behind me. It was inside my ear. Warm. Close. Intentional. I turned slowly, terrified of what I'd see. The hallway was empty. But the red lights flickered, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a figure at the far end of the hall. Standing. Watching. Waiting. Raymond Coyle. Or whatever was left of him. And he wasn't done with us yet. We didn't slow down until we reached the administrative wing, an older part of Rosebridge with peeling paint, sagging ceiling tiles, and a musty smell that clung to the back of the throat. It had always felt forgotten, like the building didn't want anyone in this section. Tonight it felt worse, like the walls themselves were holding something in. Caleb slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. What the hell is happening, Ethan? What did we just see? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the camera image, the silhouette leaning in, its face stretching toward the lens like it recognized us. Like it was following us. I forced myself to step deeper into the admin room. We need to know what Raymond was involved in. There's something about him the company didn't tell us. Caleb stared at me. You think this is connected to him? I know it is. A flicker of red emergency light washed across the hallway behind us. Caleb flinched. Fine, he whispered. But hurry. The old file room was colder than the rest of the building. A light frost coated the corners of the windows, even though it was warm outside. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls like silent sentinels. Most were labeled with dates and names, but one drawer in the back was unmarked, its label ripped away long ago. My chest tightened. That one? I said. Caleb shook his head. Dude, don't. People said that drawer belonged to Roe. I know. I grabbed the handle. It was freezing. Pain shot through my fingers. The metal felt like it had been buried in snow. But I pulled anyway. The drawer screeched open, the sound slicing through the quiet like a blade. Inside were torn folders, water-stained spreadsheets, and loose papers bundled with dried rubber bands. Dust rose in a soft cloud. Then I saw the name on the first folder. Coyle Raymond, personal notes do not remove from premises. My stomach sank. I flipped it open. The first page was a log entry in Raymond's messy handwriting. The noises in the chamber returned last night. Not mechanical. Something else. Something alive. I turned the page. Door closed on its own again. No explanation. I felt someone behind me. Temperature dropped 20 degrees in 3 seconds. Another page. Saw a shadow in camera 3. It didn't belong to me. It moved slower than a person. Taller too. Caleb hovered over my shoulder, breath shaky. Ethan, stop. Please. But I kept reading. Then came the entry that made every muscle in my body seize. It stood inside the chamber tonight. Upright. Watching. It looked like me. My blood ran cold. Caleb stumbled back. That's what you saw. You saw exactly what he wrote about. There were more pages, dozens. Each one more frantic than the last. Raymond described feeling pulled toward the chamber at night, waking up in the furnace room without remembering how he got there. He wrote about hearing whispers through the vents. About seeing his own reflection in places he hadn't walked past. Near the end, the handwriting changed, shakier, trembling. It wants someone to replace me. I hear it say my name. I hear it breathing. I'm not sure how much longer I can resist. The final entry wasn't written with a pen. It looked like charcoal. Rough, streaky, erratic. Standing. Still standing. IT doesn't let me fall. My throat tightened. Caleb whispered, Ethan, he died standing. They found him like that. What if... He swallowed. What if he didn't just die? What if he was held there? Before I could speak, the lights overhead buzzed, flickered once, and went out. Complete darkness. Then, footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming from the hallway we'd just run down. Caleb grabbed my arm. No. He shouldn't know where we are. But something did. A soft knock came from the doorframe. 3 taps. Exactly like the chamber tapping. I tightened my grip on Raymond's file. My voice came out broken. "It's not the building," I whispered. "It's him." The emergency lights flickered on for a split second, just long enough to reveal a tall silhouette standing at the end of the hallway. Head tilted. Shoulders rigid. Motionless. Raymond. Or whatever had taken his place. The silhouette stepped forward. The temperature plunged. And the file in my hand trembled, as if something inside the pages was trying to crawl out. Caleb's voice cracked as he flipped through the last few pages of Raymond's notes. "Ethan, look at this part." He pointed to a smeared paragraph, the ink warped as if written in panic. "It doesn't just appear. It chooses. It wants someone to stand where I stood. Someone to finish what I couldn't." Another line followed, barely legible. "It doesn't kill. It replaces." Caleb swallowed hard. "Ethan, the chamber didn't drag Raymond in to burn him. It dragged him in to keep him upright. To keep him in that posture. To hold him there." A cold realization crawled across my spine. It wasn't hunting randomly. It wasn't haunting the building. It was searching for the next one willing or unwilling to take Raymond's place. And it had already chosen who it wanted next. Caleb hesitated before speaking again, voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, there's something I never told you. About before you started working here." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "In '98, a tech named Harold Bynes died during a night shift. They said it was a heart attack, but people found him in the furnace room, standing upright. Eyes open. Same damn posture as Raymond." He swallowed hard. "And before that, back in the '80s, Rosebridge used to be a storage site for victims from the textile mill fire. Dozens of bodies burned alive. Some said the flames never really left this building." A chill rolled through me. This thing didn't start with Raymond. It had been here all along. The silhouette didn't move at first. It just stood at the far end of the hallway, half lit by the pulsing red emergency lights, its outline flickering as if the air around it was warping. Caleb clutched my arm so tightly I felt his nails through my sleeve. "Ethan," he whispered, voice trembling. "Tell me that's a shadow. Tell me that's not." "It's him," I said before I could stop myself. "It's Raymond." The figure tilted its head, slow and unnatural, as if the neck bones refused to bend the way a living person's would. Then it took one step forward. Not a shuffle. Not a stumble. A perfect, rigid step. The lights flickered. Step. Flicker. Step. Flicker. With every pulse of light, the figure appeared closer, the hallway shrinking around us like the walls were pressing in. Caleb backed away, nearly tripping over a stack of storage boxes. "We have to get out of this wing," he hissed. "Now." I nodded, but my feet felt as if they'd fused to the floor. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of burned metal. Something wet touched my cheek. Not a drop of water, but a bead of condensation pulled from the air by a temperature drop so sharp it stung. The figure took another step. Now the shadows cast across the wall behind it were stretching in the opposite direction, crawling toward us like skeletal fingers dragging along the tiles. "Ethan," Caleb's voice cracked. "Move." He yanked me backward and the grip broke my trance. We stumbled into the file room again, slamming the door shut. Caleb jammed a rolling cart against the handle. Almost instantly, a soft, deliberate tapping began on the other side. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Just like the chamber door. I pressed my back to the far wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the cold linoleum. My chest tightened with every breath. Caleb crouched in front of me, shaking. What does it want? Why is it following us? I looked at the manila folder in my hands, the one filled with Raymond's handwritten descent into madness. It wanted him first, I murmured. And now, it wants someone else. The tapping stopped. Silence flooded the room. Caleb exhaled shakily. Maybe it left. But then, the lights went dead. Not flickered, died. Like something had sucked the electricity out of the walls. The darkness was so complete it felt physical. A whisper drifted through the room so close it brushed the inside of my ear. Ethan. I jerked forward, slamming into the file cabinet. Papers scattered. My breath caught in my throat. Caleb froze. Ethan, what did it say? What did you hear? But before I could answer, something shifted in the dark. An almost imperceptible scrape of cloth against metal, like someone brushing past the cabinet I had been leaning against. A faint outline appeared near the far corner of the room. At first I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But then it moved. The outline deepened, sharpened, took shape. A man. Tall. Thin. Head tilted. Only a few feet away. Caleb grabbed my wrist and pulled me up. We're getting out of here. We bolted for the door, shoving the rolling cart aside. The moment we stepped into the hallway, a wave of freezing air hit us so violently I lost my breath. The silhouette was gone, but its presence wasn't. The hallway lights flickered back on in a stuttering, uneven pattern, revealing the entire corridor coated in a thin layer of frost, as if the temperature had dropped far below freezing for several minutes. We can't stay here, Caleb said. The furnace room. Back to where this started. It's our only way out. The side door's near there. I didn't want to go back. Every instinct in me screamed to run the opposite direction. But we didn't have a choice. As we moved, the floor vibrated beneath us, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The ventilation ducts groaned as if something massive crawled through them. The lights dimmed again. The shadows around us stretched unnaturally long. And then, the footsteps started. Behind us. Soft. Measured. Matching our pace. We sped up. They sped up. Caleb whispered, "Don't look back. Don't look back, don't you dare look back." But I did. And I regretted it instantly. Halfway down the hallway, Raymond's figure stood frozen mid-step, as if the light had caught him in the act of chasing us. But his posture wasn't rigid now, it was wrong. Twisted. Arms bent at impossible angles. Jaw hanging slightly open as if unhinged. His eyes. God, his eyes were two hollow, burned-out voids, flickering with sparks of red light, as if embers still smoldered inside his skull. I whipped around and nearly crashed into Caleb. "We're close," he shouted. "Just keep going." We burst into the furnace room. The overhead lamp buzzed violently. The air smelled like scorched earth. Raymond's gurney sat exactly where we'd left it, but the body bag. It was unzipped. Completely open. Empty. Caleb's voice cracked. "He got out. Ethan, he got out." A deep, resonant thud echoed from inside the chamber behind us. Then another. Then a scraping sound, like something dragging its nails across steel. I turned slowly, heart hammering hard enough to bruise my ribs. The chamber door was moving. Something inside was pushing it. Caleb grabbed my arm. "Ethan, run." But I couldn't, because the door creaked open just 2 inches. And a charred hand slipped through the gap, reaching for me. The charred hand gripping the edge of the chamber door twitched, fingers curling inward as if testing their strength. Ash crumbled from the joints and drifted to the floor like black snow. The scraping sound from inside deepened, vibrating through the steel, vibrating through my bones. Caleb let out a broken whisper. "Ethan, we need to go. Right now." But I couldn't move. Something held me in place, the same paralyzing pull that Raymond described in his notes. A gravity that wasn't physical but psychological, like the chamber itself was calling my name from inside the furnace depths. The hand pushed the door wider. 2 inches. 4 inches. 6. A wave of heat exploded out, slamming into us with the force of a blast furnace. Impossible because the machine wasn't on. I knew that smell though, burning metal, scorched hair, the chemical bite of superheated steel. Caleb staggered backward, shielding his face. "It's turning on. Ethan, move." I tore my eyes away long enough to glance at the control panel. The ignition light, normally dead unless manually activated, was glowing a deep, sickening red. Ignition override engaged. My stomach plummeted. "That's impossible," I whispered. "It can't start without the key." Caleb's voice cracked. Then who turned it on? A deep metallic clang answered him from inside the chamber, as if something had struck the interior wall. Art. The temperature spiked again, heat rippling through the air in waves that blurred the edges of the room. The overhead light flickered wildly, flashing white then blood red in rapid succession. I could feel the entity now, not just see it. A presence so overwhelming it filled every inch of the furnace room. It pushed against my thoughts, pressed into my lungs, clawed at the edges of my vision. It wanted someone inside the chamber. It wanted a replacement. Caleb grabbed my shirt and yanked me sideways just as the chamber door blew open with a blast of searing wind. The force knocked both of us off our feet, sending us sliding across the tile. The steel door slammed against the wall behind me, denting it with a thunderous crack. The inside of the furnace glowed an unnatural color, white-hot, too bright to look at directly. It wasn't the warm orange of a normal cremation cycle. It was violent, pure, hungry. A figure stepped into view. Raymond, or what was left of him. His skin was burned black, peeling, clinging to bone in patches. His clothes, what remained, hung in molten ribbons. His jaw was unhinged slightly, swinging with each tiny movement. But it was his posture that froze the air in my lungs. He still stood perfectly upright, rigid, unwavering, like death had not freed him from the position he died in. He took a step toward us. The tiles beneath his feet hissed as if frost and fire smashed together under each footfall. Caleb scrambled to his knees. Ethan, get up, man, get the hell up. But Raymond turned his head slowly toward me. The cracking sound of burnt vertebrae filled the room. He opened his mouth, the edges tearing like paper, and a sound emerged, broken, layered, inhuman. Not a scream. Not a moan. A command. Inside. The chamber roared behind him, flames erupting along the back wall though the heat never reached him. He stood untouched, as if the inferno were his natural environment. Caleb lunged forward and grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the exit. That snapped the trance and I stumbled to my feet, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the roar of the furnace. Raymond took another step. Then another. And then he moved fast. Too fast. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next he was inches from me. His hand shot out, fingers like charred claws grazing my throat. The skin there blistered instantly, pain ripping through me so violently I saw white. Caleb tackled him. Or tried to. His body passed straight through Raymond, as if the burned figure were made of smoke and fire instead of flesh. Caleb crashed into the metal control panel, setting off an alarm. Sparks shot up, lighting his shirt. He screamed, slapping at the flames. I threw myself toward him, dragging him away just as the panel exploded in a shower of sparks. The furnace room went dark. Except for the chamber. The furnace interior glowed brighter, pulsing like a beating heart. And that glow stretched outward, bleeding across the walls, pooling across the floor, reaching toward us with tendrils of red and white heat. The entity stepped out of the light again. Still standing. Still rigid. Still wrong. I grabbed Caleb, heaving him toward the exit. Go, go, go. We bolted for the hallway. Behind us, the chamber roared, louder than any machine I'd ever heard, louder than anything built by human hands. It sounded alive. Predatory. Just as we reached the doorway, the furnace door slammed shut behind us with a force that rattled the entire building. Then, click. The ignition engaged. I heard the unmistakable sound. Burners firing, flames igniting, temperature spiking to cremation levels in seconds. The machine had activated itself. And as the hallway lights flickered back on, Caleb turned toward me, shaking uncontrollably. Ethan, it wanted you. It tried to drag you inside. I pressed a hand to my throat, feeling the blistered skin. It wasn't just trying. Because in that final moment, right before the chamber door slammed shut, I had heard Raymond's voice again. Not whispering this time. Screaming. Stand. By the time the sun rose, Rosebridge no longer felt like a place meant for the dead. It felt like a place that made them. The fire department arrived first. Then the police. Then the county investigator. None of them could make sense of what they were looking at. The furnace room was scorched in strange patterns. Circular burns that didn't match the shape of the chamber, streaks of ash reaching up the walls like claw marks. The ignition system was fried beyond recognition, melted into a single slab of twisted metal. But the machine's internal temperature log told a different story. The chamber had reached full cremation heat for exactly 41 seconds. Then shut off on its own. That shouldn't have been possible. Not without someone operating it. Not without someone inside. Caleb and I sat on the curb outside, wrapped in wool blankets, the cold morning air biting at our faces even though the sun was out. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from the cold. From the memory of that blistering heat pouring from the chamber, and the sight of Raymond's charred hand reaching for me. Caleb stared at the pavement. "We're not telling anyone what we saw," he whispered. "They won't believe us. They'll say we were overtired, hallucinating, suffering from smoke exposure." Except I hadn't inhaled smoke. I'd inhaled fear. "What about the body?" I asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't have to. Raymond's body was never recovered. The county wrote it off as a misplacement during the incident, claiming it must have been destroyed in the malfunction. But Caleb and I knew, the body had walked out of that bag long before the fire. The supervisor arrived 2 hours later, his expression stiff, his tone carefully measured. He took our statements, our sanitized statements. We left out the part about the apparition, the tapping, the footprints, the furnace turning itself on. We talked in circles, sticking to the version that wouldn't get us locked up in a psychiatric ward. By noon, we were told to go home and take the rest of the week off. Mandatory leave, they called it. But going home changed nothing. Sleep became a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Raymond standing in the doorway of my bedroom, charred, rigid, eyes hollow. I'd jolt awake drenched in sweat, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. Some nights, I'd feel a weight on the foot of my bed. Other nights, I'd hear the faint metallic tap-tap-tap from inside the air vents. The same rhythm from the chamber. 3 taps. Always 3. I stopped using my bathroom mirror because twice, I saw something behind me. A tall, dark outline that vanished when I turned. Caleb didn't fare better. He quit the job the day after our leave. Told me in a voice barely above a whisper that he was done with death. Done with the building, done with everything inside it. He moved to another city within the week. Changed his number. Changed his life. But leaving didn't free him. He called me once, 3 days after he left town. He sounded exhausted. Broken. "Ethan." It followed me. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. As for Rosebridge, the crematory reopened after 2 weeks. They cleaned the walls, replaced the furnace, rewired the electrical grid, locked away the incident report, and pretended none of it ever happened. People still bring their loved ones there. They still trust the building. They still believe it's a place of final rest. But I know better. There are places where death lingers. Places where the dead refuse to lie down. Places where something waits, silent, burning, patient. And Rosebridge became one of them the moment Raymond Coyle died standing upright and didn't fall. After that night, the crematory didn't feel haunted. It felt occupied. I tried to move on. I really did. I left Rosebridge. Found a new job at a warehouse outside town. Stopped driving past cemeteries. Stopped reading obituaries. Stopped letting the quiet settle in a room for too long. But trauma has a way of stitching itself into your nerves. And whatever crawled out of that chamber with Raymond stitched itself into me. For a few weeks, things felt almost normal, at least on the surface. I went to work. I ate. I slept when I could. I pretended my life hadn't changed. Then the whispers began. At first, it was faint, just a pressure behind my ear like someone leaning in too close. A single word so soft I convinced myself it was imagination. Stand. After that, it became harder to pretend. Lights in my apartment flickered in the same slow pattern as the hallway at Rosebridge. The heating system made that same low dragging noise from the night in the furnace room. Once, I woke at 3:11 a.m. to find my bedroom door open just 2 inches. The exact width the chamber door had opened before Raymond emerged. I told myself it was sleepwalking. But then I saw the footprints. 2 faint, ash-colored outlines on my living room floor. Bare feet. Long, narrow. Rigid. Exactly like the prints inside the chamber. I scrubbed them off the tile, but they returned the next morning. I stopped telling myself lies after that. One afternoon in late October, I gathered the courage to return to Rosebridge. Not to work, not to enter, but just to stand across the street and convince myself the building was still real, and that the nightmare had boundaries. The crematory was quiet, calm, sterile. A new furnace had been installed. The windows looked freshly cleaned. Workers passed by without worry, without fear, without knowing. And then I saw it. In the small observation window of the new chamber door, barely a reflection, barely a shape, stood a silhouette. Tall, rigid, hat slightly tilted. At first I thought it was a trick of the glass. But then its hand moved. Slowly, deliberately. It lifted one finger and tapped the glass. Once, twice, a third time. 3 taps. Always 3. A chill sliced through my spine. I stepped back, breath shaking. The silhouette didn't vanish. It didn't fade. It leaned closer. I turned and left, fast, without looking back again. But even now, days later, as I write this, I feel something behind me. A shift in the air. A shadow in the corner of my reflection. A whisper that slithers across the room when the lights dim. Stand. Because the dead don't always stay where we leave them. That night, after leaving Rosebridge behind again, I tried to convince myself what I had seen in the chamber window was nothing more than a lingering hallucination. But when I got home, something waited for me on the floor just inside the doorway. A fine dusting of ash. Shaped into 2 long rigid footprints, standing perfectly still, pointed straight toward my living room. My keys slipped from my hand. I didn't dare breathe. Then the hallway light flickered once, twice, and my bedroom door, which I had closed that morning, eased open with a slow, deliberate creak, 2 inches wide. The same distance the chamber door had opened before Raymond stepped out. And from the dark inside my room, a familiar sound echoed out. Tap, tap, tap. 3 taps. It wasn't waiting at Rosebridge anymore. It had come home to finish what it started. And some follow you home.